everybody, and welcome into Blue Jays Today, where you always have something to say about the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm your host, Nicholas Playlaw.
And I'm your host, Adam Peddle. And today, guys, we got a very special guest coming on for the second time here on Blue Jays Today. Please welcome in Sportsnet, Shi Davidi. Welcome in, man.
Let's go.
How we doing, guys?
Doing very well. As it stands right now at the time of recording, I believe we are The magic number is three to make the playoffs. Magic number to clinch. The division is six right now. So, I mean, listen, Shi, you asked me how I'm doing. I'll tell you, 6 months ago, I never thought we'd be in this position at all. Toronto Blue Jays are one game away from getting 90 wins. So I'm doing pretty bloody awesome right now. How are you doing?
It's been a really remarkable season. As you mentioned, this is not something that a lot of people had on their bingo cards heading into the season. And a lot of things have broken right for this team. A lot of things have really worked out. Even when things haven't worked out, you think about Anthony Santander and what you would have expected out of him. For the Blue Jays to be in this position, having adapted to his absence, the injuries to Bowden Francis, Jimmy Garcia, Max Scherzer missing a significant amount of time. The path to this record this season, the success, is not probably what most people would have envisioned, even if you did believe they were going to get there. So it's been a really interesting, really remarkable season in many ways.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's the one that always gets me, takes me a step back and I realize, wow, we're doing this pretty much with the same guys that we had last year. You had a couple additions here and there after the trade deadline, but pretty much the same guys. And whenever I have talked to a casual Blue Jay fan that's like, well, how are they this good? I thought they really didn't do a whole lot. I'm like, well, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm questioning as well.
And the adjective that keeps popping up is magic.
Magic.
Is that something that's kind of talked about in the locker room or in amongst yourselves, where it's like, dude, they're doing it again. They're coming back again.
How do they do this? 47 comeback wins.
It feels like there's some sort of magical power in the Rogers Center, where it doesn't matter how down we are. If we're walking in the ninth down by a couple, this team is capable of coming back.
I don't know if they would put it in terms of magic, but the players certainly believe in each other, and they do have a confidence that things are going to fall for them, that they just keep putting pressure on opponents, keep playing their game, that eventually they will push through, break through, and get the runs that they need to win in a given game. And that's obviously been built up over the course of the season. You think about the way that they've progressively built on what they did. Like this season, probably definitively turned end of May, that series at Texas when they took 2 of 3 there. I've talked to a number of people around the team who really felt that was a bit of a springboard, and they've been that team since then, where they find ways, they get hits, they force the opponents into making mistakes that end up turning ball games. And so I don't know what you would call it. You would call it magic, you want to call it team of destiny,
whatever's good for the headlines.
Those all sound really good to me, actually. I like all of those.
Yeah.
But they do seem to have this intangible factor where they believe in themselves. Now, is that ultimately going to mean success in October? We'll see, but it certainly is a different mindset and a different vibe than they took into the postseason 22-23.
Well, actually, that's a great point. I want to bounce right off there. What is the big difference for you between that 22 and 23 team? Because obviously those teams were different makeups. 22 was the big just home run central, the pitching not so great, then totally flipped in the other regards in 23. What's the difference between this team that can differentiate themselves from avoiding, those kind of outcomes in 22 and 23?
We don't want to get swept.
We don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see a lot of people agreeing with that point there. In terms of wanting a different outcome, it's been since 2016 that there's been a postseason win. I think the big difference, and I think this is unique for any of the Blue Jays teams that have made the postseason, I guess maybe 85 might be the closest comp to this, is that they have so many different ways to win a ball game. And it's not just always relying on a few key players to drive the bus. It's not like if Guerrero doesn't hit a homer, Bichette doesn't hit a homer, then they're not going to win. You get contributions from the bottom of the lineup, and it could be a walk, a sacrifice bunt, and a base hit. It's a stolen base, a bunt, and a sacrifice fly, something along those lines. Like, they can do different things. They can still hit some home runs. They still do some damage. They're still slugging that lineup. But there's a lot of contact. There's a lot of strikeouts, and it's creative. It's not a passive team. They can create in multiple different ways. They can also line change. They can flip different hitters at different points in the lineup. They can find more platoon optimization. And I don't have the numbers handy, but I think their plate appearances this year are more than 50% with platoon advantage. That's a massive spike from the past 5 seasons, where it was very, very right-handed dominant and they couldn't do anything. So it's not a static lineup in any way. And I think that's a big difference. And when you have that adaptability, it plays in the postseason because you can get different scenarios. Now, we do know that home runs really play in the postseason. You need that power to get to success, but there's not a single way to do it. And if you think about sort of recent teams that you might comp them to, they remind me a bit of the 2015 Kansas City Royals. Again, it might be triggering certain Blue Jays fans who remember that ALCS there. But it's that kind of a lineup, but with more pop in it. And so how can that play? I mean, those Royals teams, they had a lot of success in 14, a lot of success in 15. We'll see if the Blue Jays of this year have maybe something along that track as well.
Well, they've been creating so many runs that, as it stands today, the Toronto Blue Jays would earn themselves a bye should they enter the postseason in this position. Now, there's always a big discourse around a bye in every sport, right? In football and in everything. Is, in your opinion, getting that bye and having a couple days off, kind of taking them out of rhythm, is that a good thing, or is there an argument to be made, that they are losing a bit of their rhythm right now? They could potentially be losing a bit of momentum, not playing baseball for close to a week.
I don't know. I feel like that's narrative based on outcome, right? If you're a team that gets the bye and then you have a couple good series afterwards, you're like, oh, that period of time really rested up their guys and allowed them to reset. And conversely, if you end up flaming out in that division series afterwards, you're like, oh, well, it was the bye, they got rusty, and it's all because of that. I don't know that there's evidence to suggest one way or the other. I think what we've really seen in the postseason, particularly in the wild card era, is it's just really unpredictable, right? Everything is dependent on matchup. It's a small sample size. If you just happen to hit either a good or a bad stretch, it completely changes your season. And even that argument, the wild card teams come in hot and that really gives them an advantage. I mean, think about the Texas Rangers a couple of years ago, right? Like, they barely scrape into the playoffs. They look like a team that's dead in the water. They get to Tampa, they beat them, and all of a sudden they're en route to a World Series title. So I think front offices around the game, in talking to different officials over the years, they're all scratching their heads on what's the best formula for the postseason. And I think if there was a definitive answer, there would be a little bit more consistency to it. There isn't. So the whole bye thing, I think that gets really driven by narrative a lot of the time.
Yeah, and honestly, in my opinion, we'll talk about Bo Bichette a little bit later. Like, I feel like Bo Bichette injury, the bye coming, might actually be somewhat beneficial for getting him back in. So I guess for this Blue Jays situation right now, honestly, yes, I'll take the bye. I don't want to really play in a wild card series anyway. So, like, take the bye, get rested up. I think it should be beneficial for the Blue Jays. Now, sticking on the postseason topic, what would you consider, Shi, a successful postseason for the Jays? Because obviously coming into this year, we didn't really have much expectations based on the prior year. What would you consider a successful season based on what they do in the postseason now? Or is it already matched that? Is it already successful, and whatever they do in the postseason is kind of the cherry on top?
So there are a couple ways to look at this, right? There is the viewpoint that you just mentioned there. This probably wasn't expected to happen. So the fact that it's happening at all is gravy. Just get in there and whatever happens, happens. I think that's fair. On the flip side, I think back to the comments of Edward Rogers at the news conference announcing the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extension at the beginning of the season, when he said the goal here is to win a World Series. That's the vision of success. And if that's the bar, then that's what you have to measure it against. I think there's probably a happy medium between the two. I think if you play a really good series and say you end up losing in 5 games, and that's part of the coin flip nature of the postseason. On the flip side, you have this amazing season and you're bounced in 3 games in the division series and you don't look particularly good doing it. I mean, that's not an outcome you want either. So I think it's probably somewhere in the middle there. They've established a culture that if the Blue Jays can keep sustainable and build upon in years to come, there's an identity here now, which isn't something you would have necessarily said over the past couple of years. I guess maybe the 21-22 teams had that will bash your skull in with offense and home runs kind of identity.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a more complete identity now, and that I know lots of people around the club feel is sustainable moving forward. I think that is certainly an element of success this season. But what happens in the postseason, what's your bar there? There's going to be a lot of eye in the beholder.
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I guess too, it's to your point, right? I mean, if they come out and, you know, they look awesome and, a couple bounces don't go their way, well, that's one thing. But if they come out and they just look horrendous in 3 games and get knocked out, I mean, that's a completely different narrative that we're going to be having after that. I don't want the latter. And we're going to need some big time performances, obviously, if they want to make a deep run. So for you, Shi, what is the Toronto Blue Jays X factor when we're going into the postseason? Is it one player? Is it one element of their game? Like, who is that for you, or what is that for you?
So the way that this team has played this season, I don't think there's a single X factor. Right? Because it hasn't been one thing for this team at any point in the season. Now, I guess if you're really looking for something, you can point to Bo Bichette's health. And if he can come back and be a semblance of himself, he can get enough stability in the knee to be the player, particularly the hitter, that he can be. I mean, that's a dynamic change right there. I mean, this is a guy who's been out a week and a half, and he still leads the league in hits and doubles. That's telling you what kind of season he's been having. The same thing with RBIs, 94 RBIs. He's still, I think, 13 ahead of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for the team lead. This is a major force. So if you can have him and healthy and productive, you can describe Anthony Santander perhaps in that way as well. If you can have him hitting a bunch of homers in that middle of that lineup, things look a little bit different. But you can't just say it's X, because the Blue Jays have been all these things. They're good defense. They're solid at bats, good contact. They're good pitching. They're timely bullpenning. All those things put together. And if you take one element out of the mix, it's not the same team. So we love to identify X factors and things like that, but that's not what this team is. That's not what this team has been. And so I think you can point to a couple swing factors. Sure, Bo Bichette, Santander really come to mind, but they found ways without those guys all year. And so I find it, I think there could be X factors, but you could say Trey Yesavage, and what does he become on this pitching staff in the postseason? But again, I think they've been the sum of their parts as opposed to one or two individuals carrying the load.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Actually, you brought up a guy, and we didn't even have the question here, and I wanted to ask. Santander, that's a guy that we know is like on his way back. But when you think about this team, like they haven't needed him all season long, so my mind kind of forgets that he could be a possibility come postseason. Where are we at right now with Santander? So obviously he's rehabbing. is there a likelihood that we do see him come in postseason and just kind of be inserted in this lineup that has already been so good? Is that something that could be a realistic possibility?
It depends on him and his progress. And so he's only been at DH thus far, and we're Wednesday today. So I believe he's playing the outfield at AAA Buffalo today, tomorrow. And the Blue Jays can proceed from there. And he's going to have to be able to play some outfield based on how the lineup's constructed right now. They can't just slip him into DH and take all of that away from George Springer. So there's still some rehabbing that has to be done here. But if his at-bats are of the quality that the Blue Jays need for him to contribute, and he's locked in enough and his shoulder is stable enough and strong enough to handle the rigors, then there's absolutely a pathway for him to this roster and this lineup. Because you think about the injection of talent and what he could do for this group, pretty substantial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think a lot of this is going to depend on his progress, his feel, and then it'll be up to the Blue Jays to reintegrate him into the group, especially into a group that's really congealed well and become a collective. And how does his insertion into that group become, how do they make that seamless and ensure that it doesn't disrupt what they have? I think that's a challenge. But again, who wouldn't want a guy who's got 40 homer potential that you can put in the middle of your lineup, especially with some of the questions around Bo Bichette and his health?
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, if he is swinging the bat well, adding in somebody that did hit 44 home runs last year, obviously this is going to be a positive. Speaking of adding in reinforcements, we just saw yesterday, or 2 days ago, I guess now, Trey Yesavage. That splitter? Are you kidding me, man? This guy looked like he belonged here. He just looked like he
looked like a top 14.
He looked like
the organization.
A top 14 in the organization. And some of those Tampa Bay Rays hitters, man, you could tell that they were going through it. Where do you see Trey Yesavage, I guess, sitting on this roster? And for the postseason, how do you see his usage, or how do you see Trey Yesavage being utilized in the postseason with this team?
It's a really interesting question. One the Blue Jays are debating as we're talking right now. And I think you can look at it in a few ways. First, it's a real success for the player development staff. Right? This is a plan that they hatched at the beginning of the season to keep this possibility open for him at the end of the year. And they help him along and set him up in terms of both development and leaving innings available at the end of the year to keep it alive. And then here you are at the end of the year, and he jumps up and has this sensational debut and becomes this intriguing possibility. Obviously, the credit there belongs first and foremost to Trey Yesavage, but the Blue Jays really set up the right road for him. What do you do with him moving forward is one of those problems that you love to have, because obviously you have that incredible debut and it's tantalizing and it shows you what he could be. But there's the balance between what he showed you, what he can be, and putting too much on him too fast.
Yeah.
So my guess right now is that we see him make another start, at least probably at Kansas City, maybe Sunday. I could be wrong about that, but that seems to be a logical landing spot. You keep him away from the Boston Red Sox, a potential playoff opponent. They don't see him beforehand. And then you figure out, how do you best put the entire pitching staff together, not just Trey Yesavage, but what does that group look like? How do you line it up for the opponent in each round? And then you've got a piece that can either go into your bullpen or maybe it's a start. But again, you have to remember that this is a guy still in his first pro season. You can't throw too much at him too fast. Obviously, the stakes go up for the team. You've got a bunch of guys who have helped get you to this point that you can't just shunt aside. So there are a lot of dynamics going into it, but I think you saw what the stuff could be. You saw what the ability could be. And I think that the Blue Jays can't ignore that. The players on the roster know that can't be ignored. And ultimately, it's how do you piece him in with all the other elements to ensure that you're maximizing not just Trey Yesavage, but the entire pitching staff.
Yeah, I think he's going to be, however he's used, definitely dynamic and interesting. I mean, that 81-degree arm angle, that's pretty fun. And also, like, the kid, like, he's 22 years old and he's talking in his post game and he's saying, I like seeing the silly swings from the hitters. And I'm paraphrasing him. I'm like, wow,
I'm
that's
just
confident.
I'm just playing a kid's
I'm playing
game.
a game.
That 5-year-olds player, whatever it was.
It was awesome to hear, man.
It sounded like somebody who was just oozing with confidence, and like you felt that on the bump watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of pitchers and specifically the bullpen, last night we saw something pretty interesting develop. Obviously, the entire season, John Schneider's been going to Jeff Hoffman for the 9th inning. He brought out Sir Anthony Dominguez at the finishing the 8th inning, and then he kept him in there for the 9th inning in a closing situation. I think even the broadcast crew in Sportsnet kind of like perked their ears up, like, oh wow, this is a little bit of an interesting development. What could this mean for you, Shi? Like, is this John Schneider maybe prepping for some different scenarios that, you know, maybe Sir Anthony could be thrown into the postseason, or a change of role for Jeff Hoffman? What do you take of that little interesting move to keep him in there? Inevitably, they did go to Jeff Hoffman.
And then the
what do you
quick
make of
hook
that?
as well, right?
And the quick hook as well. What do you make of that? Because we're kind of still trying to digest it as well here.
So I read it as this is just managing guys through a lot of workload of late, as opposed to any major shift. Again, maybe I'm wrong about that, but just think about, we had a stressful game on the Monday in the opener here. There's a lot of work for all the relievers over the weekend in the Baltimore series. And then it's back-to-back days. And John Schneider has just managed the different workloads for different guys, trying to minimize it as much as possible there. And so in an ideal world, it's Dominguez is picking up a couple outs there. Maybe you're not using you're using Hoffman for less pitches, or maybe you're not using him at all on back-to-backs. But that didn't turn out to be the case, and everybody needed to be used. But I think, especially at this time of year, the amount of work the bullpen guys have had, wanting to ensure guys are in good spots, not only for the final 2 weeks of the season, but are in good position to carry very significant workloads throughout October. All those little things are part of it. So I think that is more of the driving factor there than any sort of shift. Well, we'll see. Like, I mean, that's my read on the situation. I know a lot of people were like, whoa, this means a lot. And I think for the time being, it's more circumstantial. To me, if everybody's properly rested and you see that, it's a bit of a different scenario.
Yeah, it's true. I've noticed too, John pulling. I mean, he pulled Jose last night a little bit earlier and kept the pitch count low. And he did with Chris Bassett as well. Obviously, we got a big, as you know, there's no real off days anytime soon. So yeah, probably maybe a little bit of that. We'll see.
Well, speaking of keeping people healthy, I do want to transition and talk a little bit about what's going on with Bo Bichette. I guess first thing, we heard yesterday that he got that second opinion, and it was a positive thing. And I was kind of surprised at that, because usually when you hear guys going and getting a second opinion, it means it's not so positive. But second opinion was a good thing. Have you heard anything else, like around just around the clubhouse about Bo Bichette, how he's feeling, how he's doing, and just what the word on the street is about him?
Well, I know a lot of people instantly went to, this is super ominous on a second opinion. But if you're going to start ramping up and trying to push a little bit, it kind of makes sense that before you do that, you're not being reckless and putting him at risk of doing more damage to that knee. So I think that's an important bit of context to kind of keep in mind with second opinions. Like, sometimes you want to make sure for good reasons and not necessarily for bad reasons. The second piece with that, everything now is going to be dependent on his feel, what his knee can handle, how stable it is, how much healing can get done between now and the end of the regular season. So he did some rehab work at the complex yesterday. That will continue. John Schneider suggested that he could perhaps start some baseball activities at the end of this week. How much progress he makes, again, dependent on what his tolerance is. And so I can tell you, everybody knows this, Bo Bichette is an incredibly determined player. He's an incredibly tough player. He'll want this as badly as he's wanted anything throughout his career. But what will his body allow him to do? That's the $1 million question. I don't know if even Bo Bichette can answer that, because it'll depend on pushing it, recovering, pushing it, recovering, pushing it, recovering, and then playing that out.
Yeah. Okay. A follow-up question to all of that. Obviously, there is the element of, hey, free agency looming right over there. You know, the second that the Toronto Blue Jays, season comes to an end, whether it be with a World Series trophy or, getting knocked, in the wild card or ALDS or whatever, that's immediately what people are going to be thinking about. The whole Bo Bichette thing, where are you, how are you viewing Bo Bichette's free agency? A lot of people were saying with the second he got injured, we're never going to see him in a Blue Jays uniform again. I think that's a little over dramatic, but I'm curious to know, as a Shi Davidi, how do you see Bo Bichette's free agency playing out?
I feel like I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years, and it's possible that I have been saying this for 4 or 5 years. But I've really felt that both the Blue Jays and Bichette need the market a little bit to figure out what the right number is.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's changed for me throughout this process. And if you talk to different people around the game, I think Bichette is a bit of a unique player in terms of how you value him, because he's not strictly an average guy. He's not strictly a power guy. He's not strictly a defense guy. He does a lot of different things. Obviously, the hits and the batting average are going to pop a little bit more than, some of the other numbers. But I'm not sure, do you say that he's like Dansby Swanson? Is he Xander Bogaerts? Does he fit somewhere in between that? I think that the direct comp for him is a little bit complicated. So helping the Blue Jays, I think in this instance, would be the market, and Bichette for that matter. How do other teams see him? Do they see him as a shortstop for long term, for a few more years? All those elements get factored in the mix. So I think the Blue Jays have shown clearly in extending Guerrero that they have the ability to make these kinds of moves. Bichette, I think the key priority for him all along has been being in a place where he can win sustainably. The Blue Jays have taken a significant turn towards that. And if you look at his time up with the Blue Jays, except for 24 and this train wreck of a season in multiple ways,
right?
The Blue Jays have been competitive and given him that chance to win.
Yeah.
So I think all the elements you need for a deal have been there or are there. Do they line up? Does some team place a value on him that's just so far beyond where the Blue Jays are that he can't say no? We're going to have to wait until the fall, the winter to find out.
Well, it's funny you say that, because right as you were speaking, we got an update from Mark Feinsand talking to Keegan Matheson about Bo Bichette and his free agency class. So I thought we were a little premature asking you, but I think everybody has it on their mind that Bo Bichette will be
and
going.
I'll tell you what, I opened up the article as you were speaking, and Keegan Matheson said pretty much, similar to where you were going. He said it's rare anything else matters more than money, but Bichette is an obsessive competitor. I don't think he'd have any interest in going through a retool, whether that's in Toronto or elsewhere. And that's, I've kind of felt the same way. It does feel like with somebody like Bo, especially having been to the postseason several times now and never winning a game, never actually tasting, a round further than the wild card, it feels like if he was to sign somewhere other than Toronto, not saying he would, but if he does, there is going to be a lot of money involved, but there also needs to be an element of, okay, we are 1, 2, or maybe we already have the pieces in place to go on a run.
And the Blue Jays would be, if he is looking for that, if he gets a taste of it this postseason,
100%.
Maybe it helps his, reasoning to stay here.
No, it helps the case for sure, right?
Yeah, I think all that is exactly what we were talking about, right? Like, he's not going to be strictly about the biggest number. This isn't a Scott Boras, Chris Bryant situation where you're just looking for the most money that's on the table. He's got goals. He's had goals throughout his career, and those goals revolve around winning a World Series. He talked about wanting to win that World Series with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Guerrero's here long term, locked up. I think that he would, presumably want to be a part of that still, just as the way that he told me last September. So I don't think anything has really changed other than some of the dynamics around him. And again, what's the right number? What's the fair number that's both responsible to him, responsible to the market, his fellow players, also commensurate with what guys like him are earning. So all those things factor into it, and the market will help them.
Yeah. Final question for you here, Shi. Speaking about extensions and everything, Bo Bichette's not actually the only one who was up for a contract. Mark Shapiro is. Do you think that Ross and Mark Shapiro, as it stands right now, have done enough to secure longevity at the GM and the president position?
Well, Ross Atkins still has another year under contract, so I think that question on him can be punted down the road. But I wrote this back last month, September, August. I wrote this about a month ago. But for Mark Shapiro to come out and say that he wants to remain here and throwing that out there the way that he did, it really made me believe that if there isn't something formally done, there's probably some handshake, wink, wink stuff that's like, yeah, you're going to be back.
Right.
And I think if you look at the business side of the team, the way that they've been set up, the way that the renovations have changed the business around the team, the way that Shapiro understands the evolving business, not only locally, but also within the wider baseball landscape and some of the things that are going on around there. I think he's done everything an ownership group would want from their president and CEO. So Shapiro has often talked about the benefits of stability. They've really shown that coming out of what was a difficult 24 season. And the way that the overall organization has functioned this year with some of the ways that they were able to adjust and some of the changes that they made, not only at the big league level, but throughout the minor league side too, which were substantial and very significant and a big part of the success that the team has had this season. It's essentially proof of concept for their plan and their management. And so, my sense is that this is probably somewhat done at this point, or at least there's a sense that this is what it's going to be moving forward.
Okay. Well, Shi Davidi, thank you so much for coming in, man. We really do appreciate it. I know you're in a hotel room down there in Tampa, but we do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come talk with the lads and our community, man. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, guys.
All right, guys, that was Shi Davidi from Sportsnet, the legend. His second time back on the show. We always appreciate it, and hopefully we can talk to him again soon, coming around the postseason time, because it's going to be a busy time.
Exactly, folks. We are obviously going to be covering a bunch here, so if you haven't already done so, hit that like, smash that subscribe button. $4 a month to become a YouTube membership, and thank you to all of our current YouTube members. You guys are amazing.
Thank you so much for watching.
And as always,
go Jays, go!